Guia de estilo e instruções para síntese de fala. Você é um narrador, palestrante, com voz potente, forte e autoritária. O tom deve ser firme e inabalável. Este é o início da mensagem. Comece com energia total e um tom de comando, capturando a atenção imediatamente. The Harrington Tower caught the morning like a sheet of polished ice. Sunlight skimmed its glass ribs and spilled down onto the plaza in sharp, deliberate slices. The sky reflected back in cool blue rectangles. Against that gloss, Marina Hail looked small and distinctly worn. Frayed backpack straps digging a pale line into her shoulder, shoes smudged with the river's dust, an envelope clutched so hard the paper bowed at the corners. She paused at the building's revolving door, felt the warmth of the sun on her face, and, for a second, listened to the far hum of the city. A tram bell, a distant radio, someone laughing down on Main. Beside her, an 8-year-old boy with hair like a tangle of straw straightened and announced, with a confidence fragile as folded paper, "I came to return the baby monkey." He held up, oddly and reverently, a small cloth toy, one sewn hand-me-down eye and a patch over its seam. The receptionist behind the glass smiled at him the way people smile at wrong answers, indulgent, quick, and already forgetting. If the plaza was a stage, the opening beat had been set. Marina felt the envelope burn against her palm. She had found it the night before, wedged under a park bench in Riverside Gardens, where she and her grandmother sat sometimes, when the electricity flickered and the lamps downstairs waited like patient insects. It had been heavy for its size and smelled faintly of lemon polish and graphite. For Marina, it meant choice. Keep and hope, or bring it back and risk being turned away by strangers who measured worth by shoes and a steady voice. If this story finds you here, stay until the end. If you like moments that make you breathe out, hit like, leave a comment about a small kindness you've seen, and subscribe for more. It helps keep these little stories moving. The receptionist's voice was smooth as glass. "Mr. Harrington is in a meeting. If this is about an invitation—" "It's not an invitation," the boy said. "We found something." He stepped forward, more earnest than polite, and the cloth monkey bobbed against his chest. Marina could feel the quick heat in her face, embarrassment that she had dragged him into this, shame at the thought they might be laughed away. She had rehearsed nothing. When the envelope was meant to be kept secret at home until she could decide, now it seemed obliged to be opened in public. The doors parted, and the lobby smelled of lemon oil and warm coffee. Men in dark suits flowed by like a practiced stream, shoes polished to a soft roar. At the end of the marble corridor, Grant Harrington stood, a figure of exact tailoring and wider circles, the family name stitched into the building itself. He laughed when he saw the boy's toy, a short, startled sound that cut like cold water. "A baby monkey," he said, amusement flaring across his face. "You're sure you didn't mean a wallet, son?" The crowd that had gathered, 2 interns, a board assistant, a consultant waiting for his elevator, curled their mouths in tiny smiles. Marina felt the room tilt with them. She tightened her grip on the envelope until the paper creased painfully. Marina's mind, however, lingered not on the toy, but on the envelope's weight. She remembered the graphite lines inside, glimpsed at the bench when the paper had slipped. A fold, a quick inhale, and then she'd snapped it shut like a captured thought. Drawings, notched margins, and a small, very specific sketch of something that looked, at first, like a child's doodle. A small articulated mechanism, a creature with a hinge at the spine, a note, "Baby monkey, prototype." The name Arthur Linwood had been on the corner in a looping hand. It was the only name she had. It meant nothing to her at the time, beyond the familiarity of someone who might have loved what he drew. Grant's laughter hardened into a line. He stepped forward, making space around him, as if the air itself followed his posture. "Is that the best the plaza can offer today?" he asked, voice light but edged. He reached for the toy with the curiosity of someone who opens gifts and decides their value in one practiced glance. A woman near the reception snorted softly. Marina pictured the ledger of possibilities the building represented: a charity gala, a civic donation, a headline. She imagined the envelope tossed into a lost-and-found drawer and never again opening. "Please," Marina said. Her voice surprised her in its steadiness. "We found an envelope, too. It might belong here." Grant glanced toward her, and his eyes flicked from the worn canvas of her shoes to the envelope in her hand. For 1 second, his surprise was almost visible, like a shadow that failed to match the man casting it. He smiled the generous smile of someone who could spare generosity, but rarely needed to be generous up close. "And you are." "Marina Hail," she said. Saying her name felt like placing a stake on the ground. She might be a child in shabby shoes, but she had learned to keep her sentences simple and true. Grant's assistant reached a curt nod, the automatic anatomy of Power's etiquette. "Do you have identification?" she asked, the question practical and precise. It meant nothing in the face of simple refusal. It was the official way to say no to people who didn't belong on the polished side of life. Marina's throat tightened. She did not have an ID on her. At home, papers were folded and hidden in a tin for rainy days, bills and grocery lists, and the bus pass that was more hope than guarantee. She opened her mouth to explain, and found instead a memory, her grandmother humming as she mended socks by the lamp when the light cut out, the way she would say, almost to herself, "Return what is found, heart. It comes back to you in ways you never expect." Marina had been guided here not by hubris, but by a small, stubborn respect for someone else's loss. Grant laughed again, softer this time, but still with the kind of amusement that shuts doors. "This is absurd," he said. "Lost toys at the base of Harrington Tower? Truly, our problems are solved." The laugh invited other laughter, and one came in a ripple. The boy's face fell a little. He clutched the monkey closer, as if its stuffing might fill the space of the ridicule. At that moment, an elderly man, cane tapping a measured rhythm on the marble, paused at the edge of the crowd. Arthur Linwood looked older than the photographs Marina had sometimes seen of older inventors. His hair more winter than summer, his shoulders a little rounded. But there was a clarity to him, an attention that had not been polished away by the world. He had the kind of hands that seemed to remember reading and building, fingers ink-stained by habit rather than fashion. He stopped, studied the group, and then fixed his gaze on the envelope in Marina's hand. The air between his lips and the paper tightened like a string plucked. No one else noticed. The crowd's laughter dulled into a background hum. Arthur's face shifted, as if a photograph were being turned to catch the light. Recognition, then a small, almost shy smile. "May I?" he asked. And when Marina handed him the envelope, his touch was careful, as if he were closing the cover on the final page of something precious. He unfolded the paper with a practiced delicacy, eyes skimming over lines that to others were only lines, but to him were sentences of a life. Silence gathered. The world leaned forward without moving. Arthur's breath softened, his hand trembled in a manner that was not frailty, but the release of a long-held weight. "My God," he said, though the words in his mind were older, more private, "I never thought." He reached for Grant as if to steady himself, and at once the room rebalanced. The joke died at its first syllable. Grant, who had been the center of a small private carnival of amusement, found himself stepped aside by something he had not read on a balance sheet. An honest recognition. He looked from Arthur to the envelope, and then to Marina and the boy. A feeling like heat crept up his neck, flushing his face. Where before he had been amused and superior, he now felt exposed by a small, exact truth. He had mocked something he did not understand, and in doing so had diminished himself in the presence of a man who understood its value. Arthur's fingers smoothed the drawing. "This is from my workbench," he said simply. "These are the early schematics for the Marmoset project. I called it a pet more than a prototype. I lost these 30 years ago at a demonstration. No one believed the design would work. I kept the pieces in a drawer somewhere. I thought they'd been thrown away." His voice was rough with a remembered grief, but his eyes were bright with the opposite. Recognition, as if the world were answering a long overdue question. Grant's posture shifted. For the first time Marina saw, in the set of his jaw, not scorn, but something like worry. Worry about a reputation built on certainty now shown to be fallible. He stepped forward, and the crowd's edges closed. "Mr. Linwood," he said, the name sounding odd in his mouth, like an instrument played for the first time. He hesitated, and in that hesitation the room exhaled. The assistant, who had been ready with a polite dismissal, uncurled from her posture and looked at Grant as if waiting for a new instruction. The millionaire's apology was small but real. "I'm sorry," he said, to Marina, to the boy, to Arthur. An apology not staged for cameras, but stumbled out of a person confronting his own misjudgment. "That was cruel. You found something important. I laughed instead of asking first. That was wrong." Arthur's reply was a smile that contained more than forgiveness. It reached into something practical. "The designs are mine, but what I built with them never made it beyond my bench. If you, Mr. Harrington, are in a position to give those ideas a life, perhaps I could show you how." There was a reserve in him that did not seek exploitation, only the writing of a lost chance. He looked then at Marina, at the dirt on her shoes and the firmness in the set of her shoulders. "And you, little one, where did you find this?" Marina told them about the bench by the river, the lamp that hummed in their building when the power came and then half an hour later sank again. How the envelope had been there under the seat as if it had been waiting for someone to notice. She did not mention the nights her grandmother sat with a sweater across her knees and the small ways they saved, because some things are safer kept like seeds. She said instead what she had felt when she saw the leaded drawings, that it might have been important. Arthur nodded, as if he had expected so much. "Plans don't belong in gutters, they belong in hands that finish them," he said. Then, with a look towards Grant, he added, "If Harrington Industries would consider a small collaboration, would put some resources to building what I drew, I'd like to be involved. And perhaps," he glanced at Marina with an almost mischievous tenderness, "someone like you could learn how to turn drawings into things." There was a softness in his proposal that required no ledger. The people in the lobby moved like a current, recalibrating to a new gravity. The boy, who had been shrinking under the earlier laughter, looked as if he might grow into his own happiness. Marina felt something uncoil inside her, a cautious buoyancy. It was one thing to have the envelope found and returned. It was another to have it noticed and loved by someone who knew its real size. Grant's voice had shed the brittle sheen it wore at the start.
"If that's true," he said, "then I owe you more than an apology. Mr. Linwood, I would be honored to—" He stopped, scanning Arthur's face for signs of performance. When he found none, his sentence completed itself with sincerity. "To help. And Marina, if you or your family need anything—" "No," Marina said quickly, then softened. It was too large a thing to accept outright from someone whose world had been so different. Instead, she said, "Thank you." It was the honest, small answer she could give that kept her feet on the ground. Grant stepped closer to Arthur and Marina both, and the warmth in his posture was not merely for show. He spoke of assembling a small workshop space at the tower's back wing, an odd hush of industry behind polished glass, where Arthur's ideas could be prototyped. He offered scholarships to local young people for weekend classes in basic mechanics and drawing. His gestures were practical and public, words that would show in press releases if they wanted them to. But this moment was quieter. It was a man who had been reminded that value sometimes walks in on dusty shoes. Marina held the envelope until it was given back to Arthur, who tucked it into an inner pocket, and then, to everyone's pleasure, took the boy's cloth monkey and pressed it against his chest. "Every invention deserves a guardian," he said, "and every guardian deserves a story." They lingered, all of them, in the sunlight that streamed through the lobby's high windows. Marina's cheeks had lost some of their heat. Her spine felt straighter, as if the world had acknowledged her decision. On the way out, people who had been watching looked at her differently, less like a footnote and more like someone who had chosen, and by that choice had widened the room for others. Outside, the river smelled like returning rain and old leaves. Marina walked back toward Riverside Gardens with the boy beside her, who kept glancing at her as if to make sure she had not changed. When she crossed the bench where she had found the envelope, the spot felt ordinary and holy at once, a place where an errant paper had been found, and, by being returned, had undone a small cruelty. That night, when she and her grandmother lit the small lamp and shared a dinner of rice and a single slice of orange, Marina told the story in pieces. The tower, the boy, the laugh that stopped, the man with the cane who smelled faintly of oil and tea. Her grandmother listened, fingers folding the hem of her sweater, and when Marina finished, she said only, "You did right, Hart. The world notices when someone does right." Marina thought of the envelope in Arthur's pocket, and of Grant's apology that had been more than words. She thought, too, of small things, of how a laugh could widen or narrow a day, of how a toy held by a child could be the hinge on which a different future turned. Hope, she felt, was a quiet thing you could carry home like a warm stone in your palm.
Word of the recovered plans trickled into the city's rumor paths. A modest workshop was set up beyond the polished atrium, where Arthur's bench would sit next to young hands, learning about hinges and pins and the making of small wonders. Marina was given a scholarship to the weekend classes Grant had promised, and, more unexpectedly, an invitation to help hang flyers for the program. Small tasks that meant being part of something that had once felt beyond her reach. At home, the electricity came that week with new steadiness. Her grandmother's sewing lamp didn't flicker,
and the apartment smelled less of old dust and more of possibility. Marina walked to the window and watched the Harrington Tower in the distance, a bright slab against the evening sky. It no longer felt like a wall set apart, but part of the city's shared light. When people later told the story, they often began with what the boy said in the lobby, the odd, blunt line that had made a millionaire's laugh. "I came to return the baby monkey," he had said, and the world had tilted. But for Marina, the true pivot had been smaller, a decision to take back what wasn't hers, to trust that the right thing might have its own audience. In the end, the envelope's arrival returned more than blueprints. It reintroduced a man to his work, a millionaire to humility, and a small neighborhood to a possibility that started with a child's honest hand. Marina kept walking, towards meals and classes, and a summer that would teach her about screws and sketches and the pleasure of finishing something you began. The river watered the roots of new friendships. Arthur's workshop smelled of lemon oil and graphite. The boy found his monkey a new patch and would not stop smiling for a week. Grant learned how to listen first and to laugh less quickly. And the city, which often felt divided into glass and grout, had for a moment shown its seams as a place where things could pass between one life and another. Small acts quietly ripple. A returned envelope can be the start of a bridge. If this touched you, take a moment to like and subscribe. Share where you've seen kindness ripple in your life in the comments below. It helps bring more stories like this into the light.